Spiritualism. This comes from A Guide to Mediumship and Psychical Unfoldment. And you know, there's no date when that was first published, so it's out in the free domain, so feel free to find it. And I found what I wanted to share with you. Well, last week, in our last class, we did some channeling. And we've been doing this, that was our third time out. And I know one of the questions we asked, and it may have been this last class, was who are you? Meaning, who is this soul that's coming through and giving us these teachings and everything? And I was reading this a few nights ago, and I thought, Of course, you know, I forgot all about it when I was looking for something this morning to share with you, and then I get here, and bingo, this shows up in my head. But this is in a little part called Impersonating Spirits. And they write that attach no value to names. Judge the message according to rationality and worth. Judge the information in an intelligent fashion. Now that's a new concept. At least ways it seems like it to me, because all this information is out there and we don't think about it. We don't consider it, reason with it. We don't determine if there's anything to support any of this. So this really blows me away when I read this. Judge the message according to rationality and worth. Don't worry about who's bringing in the message. Worry about the message. There's something else that I discovered. You know, Shakespeare, we're all familiar with the name Shakespeare. Of course, I don't know how many of us have actually read any of his stuff. I know I haven't. He looked good in Doctor Who, though. But during his time, and probably up until 50s, 60s, maybe even the 70s, it was not unheard of to write something and then attach somebody else's name to it. We have all these wonderful Gnostic writings, the Gospel of Thomas. And, you know, what comes to mind is, okay, the Gospel of Thomas was probably written by Thomas, one of the disciples, right? Not unless he was pretty old when he wrote it, because it was written, if I recall, maybe 300-400 AD, long after Jesus had died. But it was attributed to him. Same as the Gospel of Philip and some of these other nice writings we like to go back to. And it was a common practice. So the message here, and the message that our teacher was trying to relay to us was, don't worry about who it is. Worry about what is coming through. Any comments or questions? Yes.
It's like, don't worry about the messenger, but focus on the message. But if it's new stuff to you, the message could be wrong, but you don't know it's wrong because it's new to you. And therefore, if the messenger is not legitimate, and he's giving you a message that's not legitimate, and unless you have some experience that, you don't necessarily know the message is wrong.
Well, what's the first thing you do when you hear something new? I know the first thing I do is I question it.
Compared to what? If it's new material to you, compared to what?
It's got to make sense.
None of this makes sense.
Actually, all of this makes sense. All of this makes sense. When we look at nature, and that's what Andrew Jackson Davis tells us, to base everything on nature, the principles of nature. And when we compare it with nature, okay, politics. We all have a good rub with politics. We got all these people in Washington all about politics. Well, politics is about power. Politics is a natural principle, believe it or not. And it's about power. It's about leadership. And leaders get their power from who? All of you. So if we attribute them as being an authority, even though they don't know their rear end from a hole in the ground, but they're an authority and we follow them without question, which is what we tend to do now. There's a lot of that going on, without question. Which one is at fault? The leader or the follower?
The follower.
Precisely. Precisely. So test everything that you hear, everything that may make sense to you. Test it. I don't know what measuring stick you might have. My measuring stick is always going to be science. I check it out with science and then I check it out with nature. The nice thing about science is everything in science is based on nature. Everything. Quantum physics is still based on nature. Of course, it's a little bit difficult to understand, but it's still based on nature. So if you hear something and it doesn't make sense, question. But if you hear something and it does make sense, well, don't just accept it. Test it. And if it doesn't pass your test, that's one of the things these spiritual seances and such, like, well, who's a good one today? Well, our book club here that we have going on reads the works of Paul Selig. Anybody familiar with his stuff? Okay. Well, that material is all channeled. It's all channeled, according to what's in the book. But if it doesn't make sense, then it's utterly worthless. And it's in the book. It's in those books. If it doesn't make sense, it's worthless. It'll tell you that. All these other soul or channeled material as well from various spiritualists. John Edmonds, Mary Longley, Allan Kardec. Those are all authors that have books on the results of their circles. And those souls coming in with those teachings tell them, don't believe everything you hear. Test it. Measure it. If it's of worth, hang on to it. When it doesn't serve you anymore, let go of it. Makes sense, yes? So does that answer your question, Ray?
Yes. But a person that's new to this will have a difficult time testing, I think.
But they should have a very good time asking questions.
They should.
And if they don't get answers to those questions, if they're intelligent, they will go someplace else and look for those answers. Because that's exactly what I did. When I got involved with spiritualism, I'm asking these people I'm associating with questions. And they didn't have any answers to those questions. So I'm reading all this other material to find answers to my questions. So if it's new to somebody, like Angelique and Tom, if this is new to them, I expect them to ask questions. And if I don't give answers that satisfy them, I expect them to go look for answers that are satisfying. Because as the Bhagavad Gita reads, you have, each of us, we have no right to the fruits of our work. Our responsibility is to share it. Once it's accepted by someone else, our responsibility ends and their responsibility begins. then they become responsible for the information they take in. And if the information they take in is incorrect and they challenge the teacher, and the teacher gets upset because of the challenge, who's at fault?
That point, the teacher.
Exactly. The nice thing about spiritualism is it's all about responsibility, accountability. If you're doing wrong by somebody else, if you know about it, then the reality that you're creating for yourself is going to be one of darkness or one of ignorance. If you provide information that's incorrect unknowingly, and then when you realize that the information is incorrect, and you go to lengths to correct it, like I did with Sharon earlier when I said that last week I argued with her, and when I was in the wrong, it was my responsibility to apologize to her for it. So that's one of the biggest things I like about spiritualism, is it teaches responsibility. Be responsible in all that you do. We don't hurt people intentionally. Most of us don't. Some of us do. And those that do, in one of our teachings, it clearly states they create a dark world for themselves. A world of ignorance. Or, if ignorance is too long a word, we'll just shorten it down to hell. They create their own hell. And those that try to correct their wrongs, they're building an altogether different world for them, a different reality. And it's in these teachings. I'm sure eventually we'll get to some of that. Was that better? Yeah. Good. Does anybody else have any comments or questions? Okay, then I want to thank you for allowing me to share this with you. And thank you, Ray.